My name is Bettina Schnell and I'm leading the research group Neurobiology of Flight Control at the Research Center SESA in Bonn. My group studies how the brain of the tiny fruit fly Drosophila controls steering behavior during flight. So for example, how they turn to avoid obstacles or predators or find food or mates. We record the activity of individual neurons or nerve cells in the brain with electrodes while the fly is flying, so we can measure its turning behavior, although its head is fixed. But we study its behavior by recording the wing stroke of the fly. In addition, we employ genetic techniques to silence or activate specific neurons and then see how that alters its behavior. We also present visual stimuli such as expanding objects or visual motion to change the behavior of the fly and to see how that information is encoded by the neurons we record from. And with all these techniques, we want to try and understand how the brain of the fly controls its behavior during flight. What fascinates me is that a brain that's so much smaller than ours can perform such sophisticated behaviors. I mean, staying up in the air and navigating to find food or avoid predators is a very complex task, and flies can perform them with a brain that has around 500,000 times less neurons than ours. Also, fly neurons are very beautiful with elaborate branching patterns, which make you wonder how they process information and what they're actually doing. What drives me is the desire to understand how a brain processes information to control behavior. And in the fly, because of the small size of its brain, we have the chance to understand at the level of individual neurons how a brain works. So in the fly, you can find neurons that when you, for example, activate them, you can trigger complex behavior such as backward walking or turning. In addition, there have been a lot of efforts to map all the neurons and their synaptic connectivity in the fly brain. And so with all that information, we have the chance in the not so distant future to completely understand how a brain works and processes information. And this is something that we are not going to easily achieve in a more complex organism. And so I think from that we can learn a lot about how generally brains function, including our own brain. The major difference between a fly brain and our brain is I think that the fly brain is just more stereotyped than ours. So what makes us unique is that we have this amazing capability of learning new things and living under vastly different circumstances and conditions and to adapt to that. Whereas the fly, while it is able to learn things, it's just to a much lesser degree. So in the fly, you can find the same neuron in different animals with the same anatomy, doing the same thing. On the other hand, at the level of molecules, our brain and the fly brain are amazingly similar, which allows us to study the influence of specific genes and molecules, for example, on neurological diseases in the fly. In science, there is a lot of pressure on people because of limited funding and positions during a time in their lives when they might also start a family and have young kids. While I do think that competition can be beneficial to promote excellent science, my wish would be to take some of the pressure of people by creating more positions with a long-term perspective, not necessarily only at the level of professorships, but also positions where people can perform active research. And I think that might prevent well-qualified people from dropping out of science for that reason. Well, I've done a lot of research on how sensory information influences the behavior of the fly and is processed by the fly's brain. In the future, I want to go more in the direction of how behavioral variability is created by the brain, because the fly does not always respond to the same stimulus in the same way at the level of its behavior. And I would like to understand how that process is generated by the brain.